This is Speak Earth. I'm Case Bradford. Thank you for tuning in to this episode with Chris Odell. Chris is the founder of Odell Sports Leisure and Datsusara. I found out about Datsusara over a decade ago when I was listening to the Joe Rogan Experience, and Chris talks about how he connected with Joe and how he connected with Tim Ferriss, how they gave him advice and helped him out early on in his journey building this company. I use a Datsusara backpack all the time. It's one of the biggest bags you can bring onto the plane with you. I use it while I'm on my bike, bringing gear to the beach. It's a great bag. It's very durable, made of hemp and organic cotton. Makes a ton of different apparel and things out of natural fiber. It's beautiful. We both connect on the level of not liking polyester. So we discuss the power of natural fiber, Chris's journey in business, building Datsusara, and much more. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you are a first-time listener, welcome. If you are a returning listener, welcome back. Appreciate you taking the time to drop in to this episode. If you'd like to contribute to Peak Earth, you could share an episode out across social media. You could leave a 5-star review on the Spotify app or the Apple app. Those always give me good vibes. They always warm my gizzards. And a third way would be to create a new sport that gets really popular. For example, something that I've always loved to see done at a high level competitively is sometimes I will see someone on their skateboard being pulled by a dog. I've always wanted to see that in a race. Like if you could have, I don't know, probably 3, maybe 5, maybe 8, somewhere in a manageable number of guys on skateboards being pulled by dogs racing through a pretty cool course. You want some turns, you want some obstacles. These are professionals we're talking about. These are professional athletes, both the dogs and the people. Then call it the Peak Earth Podcast Dogs. You'd have to come up with a catchy name for it, the integrated Peak Earth Podcast. And then just if you could make that happen, that would be pretty cool. So those are 3 ways that I would appreciate. You do not have to do any of them. Appreciate you listening. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this episode with Chris Odell. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Case?
Doing great. Glad to connect with you. I've been admiring your work for over a decade now. I don't remember when I first found out about it on the Joe Rogan Experience. I initially thought that you were on the Joe Rogan Experience, but were you on there?
No, I know it's funny. People think that, but no, I've never actually been on. I mean, I talked for years. I had talked to Joe just about sponsoring him with some ads because when I've been in touch with him since what that podcast was like, just a little tiny back green room thing in the comedy club, and 5 of us were watching it or something. And and I'd see him on occasion at that or at jiu-jitsu events or whatnot. And we had talked about it. So I've been in touch with him throughout the years, and we make some backpacks and stuff for him. But no, I've never been on, and part of me was a little sad about that, but part of me is also, especially now that it's such a big show, I would almost be terrified because I just the level of knowledge that people bring on that show, and there are a lot of people who are good at actually remembering data and bringing it out. So I have an odd thing where I research and do a lot of work and figure stuff out, but if you wanted me to regurgitate specific facts about things, it's very difficult. I kind of file it under a yes, no, whatever thing, so I can navigate. I go, no, I think I remember that being bad, or this was good, or whatever. But if I had to sit there and spout off to you the chemical makeup of hemp or something like that, it's for some reason it's something I really suck at. So I'm sure Joe would try to ask me some really technical questions, and I don't know. But I mean, if he wants to talk about some more strange, like a really extreme acid trip I had or something, I could get into that. But but that would be different. So yeah, I haven't been on there. I have interviewed some of his friends. Like I had Duncan Trussell on my podcast. I used to be friends with Daniele Bolelli, not so much anymore, sadly. But yeah, him as well. Sponsored Joey Diaz for a second too. But yeah, I never quite got onto Joe's or got him on mine. And now he's extremely busy. So tough to get a hold of him. And I've had some contact with Tim Ferriss too. Tim Ferriss has talked about us a little bit, like especially in the early days. when he was also had a very, very small following, like used to be able to just call him, like he had his phone number listed. But he was helpful in the beginning of the company. I was thinking about doing a fight promotion company or the making the gear, the bags specifically for MMA and whatnot and jiu-jitsu. And he recommended that I do the bag company and whatnot. And he just thought that would be much better idea. And I went, yeah, actually. And it turns out he was quite right, because I was also trying to get out of anything related to too much like service industry or dealing with people a ton. I mean, I like people, but I wanted something where I could kind of just create and put out a something that people could really use and would be great. I mean, the fight promotion thing would have been fun, but yeah, wouldn't have worked out well. So I was glad for his advice on that and some of his early help and whatnot. But yeah, and same thing. Joe's always been really helpful too. Him and Eddie Bravo. Yeah.
Nice. And I did listen to an episode of your podcast yesterday with you hosted Jordan Peterson, and that was a fascinating conversation. I think it was 6 or 7 years ago published, and it just reminded me of some of those ideas that Peterson was putting out at that time. They're just really, really powerful.
Good. No, I'm glad you like that. Yeah, I was very fortunate to get him on. It was a little bit of a dirty trick, because back in the day when he was just starting, he would offer you could pay a certain amount for basically like a 60-minute session or whatever to just talk and whatnot. And he was available. And so I went, oh, sure, I'll sign up for that. And I can't remember if it was like a donation thing or something, anyhow. But I had, and then I, once he signed in, I went, hey, you mind if I just record this for my podcast? And, and he was really generous with it and said, yeah, sure, go ahead. And it's strange for me to look back on that, because man, 7 years, it's such a different world. I was in a completely different headspace, but it was really great. It was great to talk to him. And then I did meet up with him a few times, him and Jonathan Peugeot, at different events, because that was when I was up in the Pacific Northwest. And so there was one time we went to some little conference that he was speaking at, and I mean, I don't know, there couldn't have been more than 100 people there, and I sat at his table with him and Jonathan, and we broke bread, and it was great. And it was much easier to get a hold of him too. And then same thing with him, like Joe, he just blew up. So it's been a long time since I've had any contact with him either, but it was great to talk to him. And I'm still very appreciative of everything he's doing. So yeah, he represented a pretty big turning point in my life, just being exposed to his work. It was fun too, because I've always been a big fan of Joseph Campbell and mythology and a lot of things like that. And so Jordan Peterson was an interesting intersection of, okay, you got mythology, psychology, which is something that I almost went into as well. I almost went down the psychologist route and study, you mixing that along with just practical life, just kind of, just getting your shit together, keeping your room clean, whatnot. And it really, as a turning point, kind of woke me up to some things, and really it's been very helpful. Sometimes painful waking up to things, but also extremely helpful. So I'm very, very thankful to him, and it aligned with all the same stuff that in Rogan and everybody else. It's like going in this good direction. So yeah, really good stuff.
Yeah. Really, really powerful. I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell as well. His really, really powerful teachings, and the modern day teachers along those same vein. It's so helpful to dig into myths and old stories. They just have so much power.
Yeah, it's these continuing narratives that go throughout time that help, and a good mythology is going to connect you with your inner self and then integrate you with the outer, whatever you want to call it, God, everything. We've kind of lost that in a lot of ways over time. And even some things like Campbell's works have been somewhat misinterpreted. I even think I've heard Peterson sort of give a little jab at him with, oh, follow your bliss, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, if you interpret it correctly, I think it's still really, really good stuff. And I have a feeling, actually, if you got Campbell together with Peterson and people, I think they would have a great conversation. It would be fascinating. And yeah, all good stuff. And I'm so glad we have somebody like a Peterson, because there were days I just go, man, I wish I could have been around when Campbell was still around, and Alan Watts and all these great guys. And I just feel like I missed them all. We don't have any modern good teachers, but then Peterson popped up, and even like Jonathan Peugeot's stuff's really interesting. There's a lot of people around that are, and even what Joe's doing. I mean, he's not exactly the intellectual, but the things he's exposing people to, and his just general knowledge of things and common sense is just, I don't know, it's good stuff. So yeah,
really, really helpful. And I'm curious if there's a time in your life when you were really struggling with just being in reality. And I know myself, there was obviously, it's like always some level of struggle, but there was a time I was really struggling. And acid trip, you mentioned that I had a similar experience when I was 19 that kind of woke me up in a way, in a lot of ways, in some ways good, some ways bad, but then also turned me towards these, like, I think probably tuned me to these more mythical guidance systems that were able to help me kind of find my own way as opposed to, the predetermined path. If you could take us back maybe to when these things kind of started to emerge for you.
Man, I mean, yeah, like you said, I mean, I don't know, I'm struggling now with reality, it's for sure, but I seem to be going through these phases. I mean, there was definitely my younger years, and then I took drugs probably a little too early. I was a little disillusioned even around 13 or so, and I don't even remember how the acid came around. I shouldn't have been anywhere near it, and I wouldn't recommend it for anybody that early, but I happened to do that, and it completely blew my mind open. And it actually, the first time I did it, it was pretty terrifying in a lot of ways. It was not a fun time. And although I will say that there was a moment where I was inside and we were trying to, like, I think I was even listening to heavy metal music because I had this idea that, like, I want to see skeletons and crazy stuff. And then that did not go well. I started to sit there and go, oh my God, I got to call 911. I got to get this out of my blood once it started really kicking in, and I'm freaking out. And my friends, not the greatest of friends, if I can really go back, but I will say they did one thing it was a little rough, but it was smart. They literally picked me up, dragged my ass outside into the backyard. And as soon as I got out in nature and I was looking around, it calmed me down. I was like, oh, this is nice in the sunshine. And I felt good. And that was something that was interesting. And then as soon as I went back, tried to get inside the house, whatever, and we were watching things and everything, it was just this, everything that was fake and wrong and artificial really, really stood out. And I just saw the bad patterns there. And that really hit home. I remember even going home and trying to get home, and I'm kind of freaking out because I'm, oh my God, my parents are going to notice what's going on. I'm like, I'm just going to my room. I'll be okay. I'll see you later. And I'm sitting there just going, oh, please just come back to reality, because I'm thinking this is never going to end. And I was trying to watch, I was watching, like, I think I had the Cosby Show on or something, just anything on TV. But in between that and the clips of commercials, I was like, I can't believe how fake this all. And nothing was funny. Everything seemed fake. And then eventually, when I started coming back down, I was like, things kind of smoothed out, and I went, oh, okay, I got back into enough of a normal mindset to sort of see where things were at. But that gave me an odd perspective. And then I revisited, some trips years and years later, and had a very extreme one where I did way, way, way too much in way short of a time. Had some deadheads actually that I let stay at my house. I had a weird time in life where I had almost like a flop pad. We ran into these deadheads at the 7-Eleven, and they needed a place to stay. And they're like, oh man, we'll give you some acid that we got. And like, oh, okay, sure. And I figured it was total bunk. I was like, it wasn't even cut. It looked like nothing. And I thought, oh, and this is a little later, by the way. I'm probably like 17 now or something like that. And and anyhow, so I took some, and then it turned out to be the cleanest, nicest stuff I had ever had. And I took beyond heroic amounts of that within 24 hours. It was a lot. And I went from the almost euphoric and amazing mode of, it was like seeing all the connections in life, looking at, realizing how all the different stories kind of, I guess, would become like a monomyth or something. Like every little story that I'd ever heard, I went, oh, I just saw where they were all pointing to and what it was getting at, and I was just literally almost seeing connections and everything. And it was quite profound, and I'll never forget it. And And then it did start eventually going a little dark at the ends, and I completely lost speech. That's how much I had. Like, my friends were about ready to call the hospital because at some point I just couldn't talk anymore. I tried talking, and verbal, it was gone. And it took me hours and hours of people just watching me and babysitting me till I came back down to reality. Anyhow, that was very close to a very dark point in my life, and that sort of helped bring me out of it in a way, because I was making a lot of bad decisions in general right about that time. I was pissed off at the world and didn't care, and just wanted to get stoned and high and ignore everything, and I thought everything was nonsense and just didn't care. And I even, around that time, some stuff went down. I even spent like 6 days in jail it was actually for some total nonsense, but it was a good experience because it showed me, like, hey, you got to get your crap together, because being locked in a cage and not having anything is miserable. I mean, I put myself in hell essentially. And so that was an interesting time. And I did turn things around a little bit after that, slowly. And then I'd say the next time that I had a big change in life, I was a bit older, and I had been sitting around not doing anything physical for many years. Just video productions, kind of got a little fat. Eventually had a friend that wanted to play tennis, and I was like, oh, sure, I haven't played since why not? And we just started playing tennis for fun, and we were doing ping pong and stuff. And okay. And then I finally started losing some weight, feeling a little bit better. And somebody had brought by some UFC footage, and I always been a Bruce Lee fan and all that. And I thought, boy, it'd be cool if somebody really trained real martial arts. And I saw UFC, and I went, this is kind of cool. And I looked for an MMA place near me, and I found one. And I started training a bunch, and that was really good. That definitely that brought me back a lot, and it also helped spur the idea for the company that I came up with, Datsusara, which makes, bags and clothing, mostly originally for jiu-jitsu and MMA. And because basically I was sitting there and I thought, I hate my career now. It's just stuck behind a computer. It was video productions. And even though I was very good at it, I will say, one of the few things I could say that about in life, I hated it. I was at that point where I just wanted to slam my head in the desk every time I got near it. It was miserable, and it was killing me. My back was horrible. I just, it's pasty, and just, it was not good. And so this training was really great. And then I came up with the idea for the company. And once that happened, a lot of things, once I started getting it going, a lot of things changed in life. I also had really bad anxiety, which I didn't understand. I just, at one point, just started having anxiety attacks. And for people that have never had them, they're extremely hard to explain. It's, to me, it was almost like having a bad acid trip that just kicks in whenever, and you don't know what's going on. And it was just terrifying. And I tried everything. I tried supplements, I tried all kinds of, and I was like, why won't this go away? And it just wouldn't. But between the working out, getting in shape, exercising, and then starting the company, I don't know, it just went away. It just stopped. So that was a big turning point in my life for sure. And then probably again later, being exposed to Peterson and all that. But I've been in some dark points. And even now, the older I get, I noticed time slips by too easily. And I have a daughter now, and I every time I turn around, I go, I'm not savoring the moment enough. I'm not present enough, and I'm not appreciating this the way I should, because in how many years she's going to be a teenager, she's not going to want to have anything to do with me. And I'm going to be sad, that I missed out on that time, even though I'm with her hundreds of times more than my father was ever around me, or even my mom for that matter. So it's an odd thing. So anyway, I'm going to stop rambling for a second there. That was kind of a long, but believe it or not, condensed history of that.
Awesome. Yeah, that's quite a journey, and martial arts were transformative for me as well in my early 20s, when I was failing out of school, alcoholic, and really depressed. And I had wrestled in high school, so that was not, it's very different from the Eastern martial arts, but it gives you some sort of a understanding. And then
real good base.
got on some jiu-jitsu and taekwondo and judo, and I was like, I want to be cage fighter, and then I got clocked in the head, and I was like, well, I don't want to be a cage fighter.
That's the same. I had that too. I had my first. It was even just we just limited to kickboxing because they thought I wasn't ready to do with the jiu-jitsu. That alone, man, I had the worst headache I'd ever had in my life. It was worse than any hangover, and I went, okay, maybe not. No, I think I'm good. So I totally understand that, because till that moment I was like, hell yeah, I'm gonna be a cage fighter. That's pretty funny. All right, well, I think that's wisdom. That's that's probably why.
Yep. It's funny. It was like, I still love this, but I'm not going to be, I'm not going to compete because I think I'd probably have a different calling.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you found one a bit there. I mean, you're doing a lot of good stuff, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and there's a lot of commonalities and just points that I think are important to highlight along your journey for people listening. I think that the anxiety going away when you start to get more exercise and engage in martial arts, but also kind of pursue your calling. I wonder if you could talk a bit about that part, because I find that absolutely fascinating, just deciding to be creative and pursue that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was, I don't even know. Yeah. I mean, it really was like a calling. I just felt like I need to be doing something different, and I still wanted to do something that would benefit people, but I wanted to do it in a realm that I gave a crap, that I really felt passionate about. And at the time it was definitely MMA and jiu-jitsu. And it was I was also passionate about natural fabrics and fibers, and in particular hemp, because I was just such a big stoner when I was a kid, and I was like, man, why doesn't anybody do anything with hemp besides the stupid hippie gear that no one cares about? Like, if it really is this strong and antimicrobial and all these great things, why aren't people doing better stuff with it? So I thought, okay, and I kept looking at our crappy gym bags that are just made of random, plastic, whatever, and just repurposed for, throw the name jiu-jitsu on it or something, and that's a jiu-jitsu bag. And so I thought I could do better than that. And so that's how that came about. But yeah, it was, I don't know. Yeah, I just felt like I had to do it. And it's been interesting over time. Like, I'm trying to do it again now. I'm trying to get it back a little bit, because over the years, we had a pretty strong run, especially when we were sponsoring the Eddie Bravo Invitational. We had a huge amount of attention on us, and things were really going. And then shortly after that, it was like, the lockdowns came, and all that really put a halt in us for a minute. And everybody was training in jiu-jitsu speakeasies and stuff, in their hidden in their backyards or underground or something. It was really ridiculous. But yeah, not a lot of people buying much. So that was tough. But I'm trying to. So I thought, okay. Over the years too, I stopped training for a while. Stopped doing jiu-jitsu for almost 7 years, because I had moved back to my old hometown. We didn't even have a gym there, and then when we did, I kind of was and I'd gotten into golf and become obsessed. So I thought, I'm not going to do that for a while. But so recently I opened up a golf gear company, very much similar to Datsusara, but with more of a vintage kind of theme style too, because I've gone from just wearing black shirts and cargo pants to wearing vintage 60s and 70s shirts and stuff like that. So I've had a little change in that too. That's been sort of fun. I still have that clothing, but I still wear that much. So it's very different from Datsusara, which is more tactical and kind of tough ninja military, whatever, it was a different thing, which I love both. But anyway, so I started that with this new golf company, but it has been difficult though. I'm not at the point where I was with the video company, where I thought I've got to do something different, and I'm going nuts and actually having anxiety because I just knew I wasn't in the right place. I think it was a big part of it. I'm not going nuts like that, but it has been difficult lately. I feel like in the last few years, especially, and maybe it's because I've got the kid and I've got other focuses. I'm not enjoying the work the way I used to. I'm not as inspired and as motivated day by day to really hit it and just go, all right, what's the next big thing? I'm not having dreams about the gear at night, which I used to do. I'd wake up and be like, oh, we've got to do this. And so it's been a little different lately, and I can't tell if that's just, just getting used to things. I've been doing it for so long, and it's, that is the problem, I think, with following your passion sometimes, is that if you need to have that to be motivated, it makes it difficult when you just need to get things done. I have a lack of discipline, and I sometimes admire people like a Mike Rowe or something, who it's like, okay, he's preaching the like, hey, figure out how to like your job. You do what you need to do kind of thing. And it's not, I mean, yeah, sure, maybe you develop some passion for being a plumber or whatever. If you just, any job well done, you can be proud and excited about that. But yeah, it's tough. I'm definitely much more of the follow your bliss sort of kind of like find your passion and stick with that. But when that dulls, or when you can't find that, it definitely presents a little bit of a challenge. So I'm a little bit in that mode, and I've also gotten to kind of wear further than I thought I ever would. So it's, and I've never been like a super high aspiration guy. Like, I like nice things. Okay. That's just something I like, high quality goods and things and food and whatnot. So, but now that I can afford most of those things most of the time, it's hard to, I've lost a little sight of like, okay, well, where, what am I really doing, and why else am I doing this beyond just to provide a good lifestyle and to give people things they like it's, yeah, I'm losing a little bit of that thread that was keeping me kind of propelled. So I've been working on finding that again, and trying to kind of solve it, see what's going on. Could just be that I'm drinking too much, which I was going to ask you about. You said you struggled with alcoholism, because I didn't used to drink a lot in my younger years. Yeah, obviously just mostly a stoner, but I've noticed I've noticed how easily I actually really don't have a very addictive personality, despite my history. I was never the type that, like, I had friends that went off and got meth addicted and everything else. But it was never a problem, even with exposure for me. However, alcohol, I can really see the nasty little trap, because it's a lot of fun. And for someone like me who didn't used to be very social, it kind of helped me reset my sort of closed off stoner world. And now I'm like, oh yeah, I want to talk to people, and it's good. And that's great. But boy, the payback on it, and there's definitely, it's harder for me to get out of the cycle where I go, oh, I drank too much and ate too much, and now I slept like crap, so the next day I'm a little tired, so now I need more caffeine, and then I'm going to probably want to drink later to take the edge off of how crappy I feel, and just rinse and repeat. And then on top of that, like, there's a little anxiety, or a little bit of like a crappy depression, when it wears off again too. And I find it very hard to just say, you know what, I'm going to take a week off or something. Like, I'm really thrilled with myself when I don't have a drink one day. And it's so easy to go from like, oh, like one drink's enough today, or, oh, 3 drinks is a light day. Actually, 4 or 5 drinks is still relatively light. I'm not terribly hungover. And and I can see it. And because I've seen it from the outside too. And I've used to criticize people for behaving like that. And so I don't know. I'm wondering too if it's affecting my motivation and general clarity and drive, beyond just performance too in sports as well, which I've noticed. But I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on all of that?
Absolutely, yes. That's lots of thoughts. I sort of want to go back a little bit before diving into the alcohol portion, because I'm really curious about the company Datsusara that you started.
Yeah.
Long time ago. I kind of just, although I knew the benefits of hemp, I didn't really, I wasn't aware of the drawbacks of polyester really until the past couple of years. And now I've sort of find myself writing about it and getting a lot of attention for writing about it, and noticing that it's really starting to take hold in the mainstream, and it's really trending and getting a lot of attention, which is good. I don't know, it was like must have been 3 years ago where I realized, like, oh, polyester is suboptimal to say the least, and like all my clothes are polyester, and I've spent a lot of money on these clothes, and I have to get rid of them now because I can't
Well, it's tough. It became such a huge trend in sports, and especially and even now. I mean, the jiu-jitsu gym that I just signed up with here, I mean, great gym. I love the guys, but I noticed that the trend is to have everything branded with your own. If you have a franchise, like whatever, SBG, Gracie, doesn't matter. They tend to do their own gear now, but they are working with even Fuji, which used to just make cotton gis. And I looked at their gis because I was feeling it, and I'm like, looking at my daughter's gi that they made her wear, because I've got my own, but with the kids, they make them wear their branded gis. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, doesn't really feel right. It feels like that's plastic. I'm like, nah. And I looked at the tag, and I'm like, it was like, I think it's 60-40 polyester cotton. And I went, really? Like, even in a gi? And it's so pervasive. And then of course every t-shirt they have has that too, and every anything. It's just all, and you look at that in sports gear in general, and that's exactly what it's become. It's all, high performance, moisture wicking, a bunch of BS. And and for whatever reason, not enough people really know about the problems with it. And that's part of why when I saw some of your posts, I went, man, you're doing a good job of explaining this to people, because I've tried a little bit to sort of educate folks. And like I said, I suck at regurgitating information, so it's been difficult. But it's definitely not good, and especially in sports where you're sweating and getting hot, and you got a lot of close contact with your clothing. So but it's interesting how people are aware of the dangers of plastics in their food, but not as much talk about the clothing. It is starting to come around, which is nice to see, but boy, like if you look at the trend of cotton versus polyester in clothing for the last 10, 20 years, it's just like, woo, poly's just going straight up. And it amazes me, because in the world where everybody's complaining about the environment and everything else, and yet I'm sure even Greta Thunberg's running around in all poly outfits. I'm quite sure she is, and it's ridiculous. I'm going, what, really? Do you not notice what you're doing? So it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and we live in a world where, like, nobody wants to hear about another thing that is toxic that's around them, because just like everything,
I know.
like you realize when you were tripping at 13, everything's fake, everything's toxic, and we can have this moment where we throw up our hands and say, well, screw it, whatever, I'm just going to ignore it. But you could also just decide to say, hey, I'm actually going to, bring some order to this chaos, like Jordan Peterson teaches,
Yes.
and try and right the ship a little bit as best that we can in our own lives. And if we can extend that to other people and help them out, that's great too, and worthwhile, because it not only does the polyester contribute toxicity to our bodies through our skin and through our lungs when we breathe it in when doing the laundry, it's also adding a ton to the air, to the land, to the oceans, and the natural fiber is so much more comfortable. The sweatpants really that you make those are the most comfortable sweatpants I've ever had, and they're incredible.
Oh, awesome.
And I'm not just saying that because I'm speaking to you on this podcast. It's 100%. They're incredible. It's the hemp and organic cotton is so much more comfortable than polyester, really, in every realm. So there are a lot of reasons to take action.
Yeah, I think so, and that's I'm trying to. One area of challenge with some of the products like that is in most products, I find it really does feel better. Like I don't, anything I wear out on the golf course or even just in data, like I hate the feeling of polyester stuck to my skin with sweat. It's nasty. And I moisture wicking my ass. Like it is not good. And yeah, though, like there are some areas that have been tricky though that I'm still working on. Is like, how do you make a rash guard, that's form fitting with natural fibers? And that has been a challenge. I'm still, I need to revisit it again, because I gave up for a minute. I went, I wasn't finding anything that was working out well, or it was always a blend of some synthetics and some not, which I guess is better than all synthetic. But still, that one's been difficult. But in general, yeah, it's been really good to, like, for myself in my life and for my family, and it's starting to stretch to some of my friends, just making people aware of how many things are synthetics, in particular poly, everywhere you go, and trying to get them just away. Like now, if I go around my house, I'm very happy because there's very little of that. I mean, most of the plastic is in technological devices or something where it kind of has to be. But I mean, if we're talking, my daughter's clothing, her sheets on the bed, everything that she interacts with, like I don't even really buy her anything like plastic toys. I avoid for the most part, unless again it's like something that just can't be made any other way. But I'm like, nope, you're getting wood and fabric and metal. Like we're going old school, but really, and most of that stuff's just better anyway. So yeah, but it's been nice to work on that, and I want to try to push that more out to my products and help more people become aware of that, because it was always an environmental thought before when I was trying to get into these natural things and promoting the hemp and whatnot. It was like, hey, yeah, it's, better for the environment and probably better for you a little bit. But I didn't really think about exactly how bad it was. I mean, it was there, I guess, but I didn't make that a big issue when talking about our products and why it's a better product and, how it can help you out. And that's something I still want to work on. Yeah, just marketing wise, to like, how do you really help people understand that this is an issue, and especially in a world where, yeah, like I said, everything's toxic, everything's giving us cancer. It's like, well, if you can at least cut down on one, or, and something especially that might be messing with your endocrine system, and possibly could be related to a lot of other bigger problems we're seeing. It's certainly a factor, and if you can eliminate that, maybe some health comes back. So, yeah, I think it's definitely an important thing, and a worthy cause.
I agree. No, 100%. There's really primary pillars that we can look at from the perspective of holistic health, and just trying to mitigate toxins from certain areas, like in the kitchen, like in our clothing, like in our food. And it is manageable if we take it one step at a time. If someone's listening to this and is just being introduced to this idea that the polyester clothing may not be the number one priority, but somewhere it's definitely going to be something to look at and invest in, because it really is important, especially like the sheets, like you mentioned, for your daughter. That's a big one, because we're sleeping on that all night, and the polyester will block your skin from being able to breathe and do its thing, detoxify your body, everything that our skin does while sleeping. And then in the heat, I think you mentioned that earlier in the conversation as well, our skins will open up in the heat. So if we're wearing plastic, it's going to start degrading, melting, emitting volatile chemicals, plus our skin is open. It's going to be going into our body, and that's better to avoid that if we can.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's good to see at least a few studies coming out on more of that, because for a while it was kind of like, well, is this just some hippie nonsense, or is this really a problem? And I've noticed I'm a little more able to find information on it now than I used to be. It's still kind of tough. And I wonder sometimes if there's some big clothing world conspiracy where they're like trying to suppress it or not tell people, but because it'll change things drastically if everybody wakes up to this and goes, oh, we got to get rid of this. Like, that's going to be a whole different deal. But yeah, and things are going to get more expensive too. I think that's part of the problem, is like especially with our products. I really hate charging people a lot of money, because I've always wanted to make it very accessible for people. Because I remember when I was younger, I couldn't afford anything hemp, hardly, in particular, because it was so expensive. I was like, why is it so damn expensive? I don't understand. Like, shouldn't it? It's a natural fiber. It grows easy. What's the problem? But just because it's not being produced a lot, and it is harder to do. It's much easier, apparently, to whip up some polyester, and crank out 10,000 units than to make 500 of our bags or something. The amount that we pay just for the materials alone is quite a bit. I mean, it's got to be 10 times more than what people are paying for polyester materials. And so it makes it difficult. But I think the more that we shift back to those things, hopefully that'll bring costs down, and people will just have to start buying quality too. Just go, all right, I'm not going to buy 20 of these. I'm going to buy, 5 of something that's going to last longer, or even if it doesn't, it's just going to be a better quality experience. And it's just like dealing with your nutrition. It's like, are you going to buy the pasture raised steak, or are you going to buy, a bunch of cheap, CAFO lot, beef that isn't going to be as good for you? And it's tough, because you can't always afford the good stuff. And especially if you go out, whatnot. But I think making an effort and getting things back to that, and if we could return, just like in the food industry, the more people that go back to that, it should help. Hopefully, make it more bring costs down, or at least make it more accessible. Would be nice. So.
Yeah, that would be the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, where we start to vote with our dollars, and we activate economies of scale, and then the prices come down on these things, and then more people can afford them, and we can just kind of snowball into a better world that way. But something that's really coming to mind now is I've never really realized how. So hemp is cannabis, not the kind that is sold to smoke and used for the THC, but like a different breed. How does that plant turn into a pair of sweatpants, like into fiber?
Yeah, there's a lot of work, and I think that's part of why it lost out. Like when the cotton gin was invented, and they figured out how to process cotton a lot easier. And there's, you get into conspiratorial things with DuPont and everything else when you go way back on this stuff, and who knows. But I think hemp, it is hard to work with. I mean, you got to beat the crap out of it basically, and then separate the fibers out and then process them in a way that you can do, especially now, like make something besides a burlap sack out of them. I mean, if you're just going to turn it into something really rough, okay, you thrash it out and separate the fibers, and it's not too bad. But if you want to turn it into something resembling a nice t-shirt, or something that's not going to be too scratchy. I remember some of the original hemp clothing that I had worn was just, I mean, it was cool, but it was like really, really rough and scratchy, and you'd be like, this is not exactly comfortable. So when they finally figured out better ways to process it and to blend it with cotton, that was pretty good. Although sometimes some of the benefits get a little lost. If you break it down too much, you lose some of the natural strength. You probably lose even some of the natural antimicrobial properties that it has. Or microbial resistant, I guess I should say. So you have to be careful how much you process it. I think I've even seen people try to do like a viscous hemp, which is kind of that same process that they use for bamboo, which is just a super chemical process. I mean, now it's comfortable and probably still better than polyester, but it's a lot of chemicals, and it kind of ruins it for what, the strength and some of the better purposes of the fiber. But hemp takes a lot of work to process, and I'm sure that's part of why it's still to this day very expensive. It's also why I think we don't see any real hemp production in the first world, because not only from what I've been told from the bigger hemp experts on the planet, is that you need millions of dollars of processing equipment. Then you also need to find a textile engineer that actually understands hemp, which good luck finding them here. There just aren't that many. And so and then I think even when you have that, I think you're still looking at probably a lot of just the costs of everything beyond the labor and how expensive it is to have a farm here versus third world country or just China, whatever. I think that's why you just still haven't seen it. A lot of people have talked about it. Even Patagonia, it seems like every couple of years they go, oh yeah, we're going to get behind hemp. We're going to start, putting stuff out here in American farms. And it never happens. And if Patagonia can't get it done, there's something going on there, and I would love to see it happen. But for now, like even all the stuff I buy, I've got to get it in China. I mean, I can't stand China, but I work with these smaller companies that also hate their government, and then they would just try to do what we can. And and I am at least supporting a good thing there that isn't, just polluting the crap out of their country, the whole world, whatever. I mean, so I'm hoping to kind of keep that alive out there, but it's tough. And actually they're planting less hemp than ever now again, since the lockdowns and whatnot, and everything over there. They inform me, they're like, oh yeah, there's just not as much being made, so prices are going up. But yeah, they're the only ones though making it with good blends with it and with different fabrics and things. Just that's it. It's the only place on the planet. I mean, there's other places that produce a very, very small amount of it for a few things, but nobody that's really exporting it or doing a good job of making it available for businesses like mine and whatnot.
Well, that's a great rundown.
Sorry. The small dog and big dog. There they go. Yeah. So it's a difficult industry. It is difficult to work with hemp. And I mean, I think it's worth it. But it's a challenge, and I can see why a lot of people just get frustrated and throw their hands up and stop doing it or don't bother. It's, at this point though, I'd be happy just to see people go to organic cotton or linen or, any natural fiber is still better than dealing with everything poly. But I'm still trying to hang on to the hemp, just my old my old ways. I do think it's very useful, and I hate to give up on it. Kind of makes our company a little unique too. So it's I mean, I think it is a superior thing. It's just it's becoming more and more difficult still. So, but we'll see. Things could turn around.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, especially in the context of jiu-jitsu, the microbial resistant properties are really advantageous, because that's one of the biggest drawbacks to. And I wonder how much polyester contributes to the growth of different skin, bacterial infections within that environment, because it is pretty pervasive. The mats, the rash guards, like you said, Austin, is just plastic. And like, how much does that contribute to getting skin infection? I don't know. It must to some degree.
I would think so. I mean, they've got some of them where they treat them with who knows what horrible extra chemicals to like fight off, microbes and whatnot, but that's probably just as bad for you as not doing it at all. 'Cause I don't know what the stuff they use for that's pretty nasty. But I mean, yeah, for the most part, polyester stuff, I mean, it harbors, like, I remember the way I noticed this at first was just the fact that when a polyester, rash guard, when you get enough stank on that, it is really, really hard to ever get it to go away. It just like sucks it in, and it's nasty. And yeah, so I don't know so it can't be good because I think it just likes to just hang out on there and probably on the surface, and it just doesn't seem to wash out very easily. So yeah, it's kind of nasty stuff, and I'm sure it's not helping anything. That's for sure. So yeah.
Yeah, and that odor is just indicative of bacteria that's growing. And for people who don't do jujitsu, I know that at Datsusara you've got compression shorts that are made with hemp and organic cotton and a little bit of spandex that are great for training and when you need the extra, when you can't go commando, and it's great for sauna, hot yoga, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So those are excellent as well. And the fascinating part of this to me is that we do have these fibers, these that can be perceived as a technology, these superior technologies that are worth investing in to improve our lives in a lot of ways. It's just not many people are aware of it, and most people, when they learn about it, it's like a light bulb goes off because this polyester is plastic, it's petroleum based, it's essentially just filled with strange chemicals that are made really cheap in China. And there's a lot of things like this. We can talk about the food system, how it correlates with a lot of the nasty chemicals that are in food. And it seems like most people don't care, but when they listen or hear someone who does care talk about it, most people are receptive to it on some level. Just be like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think when you get people down and you get them past their initial, I don't know, knee-jerk reactions to things, and you explain it, it is something that I think everybody's kind of interested in, even just from like, hey, don't you just want pure good stuff, and whether it's your air quality, your clothing, your food, whatever, I mean, it shouldn't be polluted and toxic all around you all the time. And it's become, it's tricky. I had higher hopes for this when I started the company, and even maybe 10 years ago, in some ways, than I do now, because a lot of politics has gotten into this, and it's unfortunate because the more, without getting too deeply into it, I mean, even with me and my customer base, it's been very tricky because it really shouldn't be a political thing to want to get rid of toxic stuff. That should be across the board. That should be everybody. The conservatives, the liberals, shouldn't matter, right? And at least one side says they care, but then, like I said, Greta Thunberg, she's running around in polyester. She didn't give a shit. Like, it's not really what's going on. She's political, and that seems to be what most people on that side of things that pretend to care are. They're just, I don't know. It's turned into a completely different thing. They're not really that concerned. Whereas, and then you get people on the other side who are just sick of anything that seems political left, which I understand. They're just tired of hearing it. So they will just rebel against it by going, well, screw you. I'm going to go get a freaking, Kefo lot cheeseburger. And I don't give a crap, like, give me the most GMO, whatever, like vegetable you can find. And it's, if they're eating a vegetable, whatever. But, it's just, and they don't care, and their clothing, everything else, they're like, screw you, I'm going to Walmart, I'm buying the poly t-shirt, like, just because screw you guys. And I totally, I get that, but it sucks because I think there's a lot of people, once you do talk to them, from either side of things, that go, yeah, well, we definitely want that. I mean, I know a lot of conservatives, for instance, that they do care about pasture raised beef and farms, and because if you really talk to them, go, hey, you realize if you want to keep small-time farmers and people who really care about the land and whatnot, you want to keep them around. Like, you can't be buying the CAFO lot, ground beef that's just destroying it from the giant mega corp that's taking over all the farms. Like, that's not only nutritiously bad, it's environment, everything else. Like, it's going to screw up. It's going to make the world that you say you don't want. So, and it's going to be more government and everything else. So yeah, it's when you talk to people, and there are those people out there, but it's hard to it's hard to reach them sometimes. And it's hard to get the people who, claim on the other side to care about these things to actually take it in action. Like you said, vote with your dollar or whatever, like really, everybody wants to go vegan or something, which obviously there's problems with that. And they're attacking the cows and the people who are trying to do regenerative agriculture, who are doing a great job in keeping things natural, real food. They're going after that they're going to destroy that by what they're doing too, with all this veganism. And it's really just going back to, more synthetically created foods and whatnot, that's not going to help anything, and it's not going to make anybody healthier. It's a shame, because there should people like Joel Salatin and whatever, and doing all these great things, and they should be really highlighted. And I would think even Michael Pollan's work, as much as I don't agree with him on certain of his views, he did a great job of just outlining how important real food is, actual food, not anything that has a super long ingredients list and full of chemicals and preservatives and, whatever else. The importance of that is huge. And I would think that should be something everybody should be able to get behind. And same thing when you stretch it out to clothing and everything else, that ought to be something that should be just a universal, how can we make humanity better kind of thing. And so I don't know, it's a matter of, can we get people to stop being so polarized and actually, come together on some basic stuff here would be nice.
Yeah. That's really the key. One of the biggest dragons that we're collectively facing is this polarization, which I believe is sort of downstream of dysregulated nervous systems, or just lack of health. Like everyone's struggling just to feel okay during the day. They can't think clearly. And the second somebody hits them with some propaganda or marketing around fear of heart disease or the climate change, everything's going to be underwater. It'll be happening in 5 years. They said that 15 years ago. Well, this time it's actually going to happen. Well, meanwhile, I've been here in LA for 9 years. I'm waiting for the ocean level to rise even just a little bit. It's been the exact same, the entire time.
Right.
And so for me, having to go through this world, my thought was well, I'm just going to do my best to learn about holistic health, vitality. And I believe that if the more people who are able to raise their vitality, the more we're able to access creativity and solve problems and make life better, because there's, it's a really misunderstood health, and that's probably on purpose. The people who are confusing other people are probably doing that to sell things, and they're very profitable, and they have a ton of power, and they're able to manipulate minds into thinking that their products are going to lead to health, whether it's a Beyond Burger or whether it's, Frosted Flakes or Wheaties, they've been playing this game for a long time, and or if it's polyester, this performance material that they're, it's insane. But there are ground level truths that we can access that can completely transform our lives that I've been able to tap into, that I'm doing my best to share. And the natural fiber is a part of that. Local beef is a part of that. I think good quality sleep is a huge part of that, which is a big one. I think a lot of people are stuck using technology late at night, or having the lights too bright. And amazingly, something that I've learned, a recent revelation, was how much that impacts sleep. And there's just a lot of these revelations that are happening now. We seem to be entering a new awakening, a renaissance that is really coming on over the past few years, probably catalyzed by COVID. But it's amazing time to be alive.
Yeah, well, that it is. It's certainly interesting. Yeah, we're in that Chinese curse or whatever. I mean, you live in interesting times. Yeah, it's that is for sure. There's no lack of that. And as bleak as sometimes it seems to me, especially when the whole COVID and lockdown stuff came around, I went, oh man, when I was younger and as a teenager, I was much more cynical and thinking that everybody was, idiotic and society was absolutely horrible. And as I got older, I was like, okay, people are sort of reasonable. We're mostly getting along, and okay, there's some messed up stuff for sure. But I had kind of lost that edge of going, oh no, the tyrannical government is out to get us, and people are really, really not very wise, and they're going to make terrible decisions that'll hurt each other. And then I saw that come around pretty hard. But at the same time, it's I went back to my a little more darkness, and I don't know, I've gone kind of into a Taoist mountain sort of in my own life, where I'm not I don't know, I stopped doing my podcast. I kind of got away from people a little bit because I've been trying to work out like, okay, how do we reapproach this and figure this out? But it's also nice to see a lot of people who are figuring things, and it also at the same time it helped start some things and awaken some people to some stuff, and you got people like yourself who are getting the word out, and I think there's definitely a hunger for it. I mean, like we saw with Peterson, it was like he was just saying some basic common sense stuff in a lot of ways, and especially young men are just like, oh, please give us more. Tell me how I must clean up my room. Like, what can I do to make things better and improve my life and get it together? And that's fantastic. I mean, and I still go to. It's been remarkable to go to like his lectures from 100 people in a room to all of a sudden I went to some big arena here up in Austin the other day to go see him, and it was amazing just to like, this is nuts. I mean, it's just great. So there's a thirst for it, and we may be a minority, but I think it's a strong one that might help save things a bit, and it's certainly worthy, and it is good to see people. I do see, it seems like there's something coming back around. Like I'm seeing some positive movement now, which I felt like I didn't see for a while. I just thought, oh, it's just this constant losing battle, and it was getting a little disheartening. But but it seems like there's some good movement. So that's I'm becoming re-encouraged. So it's nice. but yeah, it's tough.
It reminds me of something he said on your podcast that I listened to yesterday. It was something to the effect of like, there's a drive towards a moral good within every man, and it counterbalances the suffering of being alive, just the pain of existing. We all have a drive to be good, and it's so true. We do all have that spark of light inside us that wants to do good, that wants to contribute, and unfortunately that does get co-opted into some of the things that we mentioned, but there's also, I think the truth resonates in a certain way, and if we keep seeking, if we keep going for it, we can find it and click into it, and then we directly experience a better life as a result, and then we can have the opportunity to share that, and it really is a pretty beautiful sequence of events that is available to everyone, because we can make our lives better and then ripple effect that out in other people. It's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. And and that direct experience, that's something that's so important. My late friend Antra Ali used to talk about that a lot, and just people's capacity for a direct experience and for having that. And he saw a lot of how people were losing that through social media, and then just all the usual societal things. And I think that's been smashed down pretty hard these days. And it's tough to get people out. I mean, we have a mental health crisis, and we have for a while, and it just seems like it's just getting worse. And the more people are on social media, the more they're not getting out in the sunshine, getting good food, like you said, getting good sleep. It's a real struggle these days. And then especially during the lockdown years and whatever, it was like, oh, all of a sudden everybody's more on drugs, whether they be legal or not, whatever. I mean, it was, and nobody's going outside. It fed into all the problems we were already having. People were more on their devices and just completely messed up. And it's really, but it's there. You're right. I mean, people are hungry to get out of that and to re-tap into their goodness and make things better and figure out why are we going through this life and suffering. And as much as a lot of people are still taking away the meaning or trying to find it in bad places, like worshiping the government somehow instead of God or whatever. I'm not big like, oh, everybody needs to be Christian or everything, but it's like people need to get in touch with that greater thing, that the greater good, and the things that the real I guess purpose or meaning behind life. They need meaning. And that's something that Peterson talks about a lot, obviously. And people have lost that or just misplaced it grossly. And, but it is nice to see that a lot of people are coming around. And I actually have been encouraged, even just by coming out here to Texas, especially in the area where I'm at. It's just, there's people who are lost everywhere, but it's very interesting to see a society that's a little more unified here. And like I said, they're a little more in shape and just kind of in general taking care of themselves better mentally and physically. It's interesting to see. I just saw California. It just seemed like it was just really going downhill in so many ways, but in a lot, any big city kind of in general. But but yeah, it's been nice to see a little turnaround of that out here. I don't run into as much, horribleness.
That is a great riff on finding meaning. And there was something I meant to ask beforehand, but I think it ties in nicely here. Is just the name of your company, Datsusara. Could you maybe describe what that means for people and how you chose that as the name of the company?
Yeah, that was it's a great thing, and also sometimes one of my things where I go, oh man, did I really screw up marketing wise with that? But because it's tough to pronounce, it's tough to remember if you're not familiar with it. But when I first thought of it, I went, oh, okay, like, but hey, Mercedes-Benz was probably a little weird when people first heard of it, and now it's very easy. But but yeah, it's been a little tricky. I ran into that word actually when reading Tim Ferriss's 4 Hour Work Week, and I've always had a pretty strong interest in a lot of Asian cultures, in particular Japanese. And so when I saw the word Datsusara, I went, oh, that's cool. It basically breaks down to, and the literal translation is to escape the salary worker's life. And part of what I was really railing against in my younger years, and even when I started back then, was that people just working jobs for the sake of just like, well, society told me I need to go to college, then go to here, get a desk job and work at a company that I don't really give a shit about what we're actually making or how we're affecting the world. And I'm just gonna miss all of life and worry, I'll catch up in the retirement. I'll do something nice and then see my kids and whatever. And I hated to see people kind of just droning off into that destined sort of corporate government, whatever, just path. It just, to me, that's an unfortunate and kind of a waste of I don't know, of humanity in a lot of ways. So that was a big thing. And so I thought the word, and of course in Japan, I mean, they work themselves sometimes in that manner to literally to death. I mean, there's another word, I forget what it is, but for people who literally work so hard that they end up dying. And I mean, just that's the cause, and which is insane, but it happens. And so that was so I figured, coming from their culture, that's probably a good word. Datsusara was a good way to express that. However, I have also had to fight then people who would see that as just, oh, so you just want to sit on the couch and be lazy. And it's like, no, that's not what we're talking about. And the same thing when people get on Joseph Campbell's thing, oh, follow your bliss, oh, whatever, hippie, you just want to go smoke pot and sit around. Like, no, that's not really what that meant. It's like, no, go find your meaning, go find your purpose, what calls you, what you can do to work within yourself and within society and do something that you're good at and that you care about. And that's always what I wanted for Datsusara. And you know what, if working at a company, at an office job, and you care about what they do and you're into that, fantastic, go do that. I don't care. I can go work 12 hours a day at an office job. I mean, it was never really about that specific or dogging on the people who go and provide for their families that way. Fantastic. But just, I think just do it with care, do it the best you can, and do something that just is meaningful and something that you can really use up your personal potential. I mean, I think we all have our talents and our things that we have to offer to the world. And I like seeing people really embrace that and find what their calling is and really be do the most that they can, that they've been put here to do. So so that's kind of how that came around. I wish I would have picked something easier to pronounce or spell or anything else. I remember the first few times that Joe Rogan said it was like Datsura, and he's mispronounced it a million ways, but people figured it out. Even when Duncan Trussell, when I was sponsoring his podcast, I remember he called me before the first time I think he was going to have it. He's like, okay, say the word with me again. I'm like, Datsusara. Okay, Datsusara. Say it again, Datsusara. And we were like chanting back and forth so I could get it right. But it's been good, and it's still there, so it's fine. I mean, my newer company is just Odell Sports and Leisure. That one's a little easier, but it's less obviously meaningful. But it's my last name, so I figure, all right, the rest of it, people will figure out the values by just following the company, hopefully, eventually. So, yeah.
Powerful. Well, I'm grateful that you decided to engage in Datsusara by leaving your job in video production to pursue your calling to create natural fiber hemp bags and goods and everything that you've done since that time, and provided a tremendous amount of polyester alternatives to a ton of people at this point, and you'll continue to do so. And it's amazing. So thank you for doing that, and really appreciate you joining me to co-create this episode and share your story as well. It's been a deep one that I've really enjoyed, and your story is an inspiring one. So thank you for taking the time to join me and here as well.
Oh, well, you're welcome. Doing the company is a pleasure, and I'm just glad that there are people who are benefiting from it, and it's I wouldn't have anything I have without people's support like yourself. So really, really appreciate it. And and you put up with all my rambling, and I've been drinking too much tea today, so I was really all over the place and just went on and on and on. But hopefully people find it somewhat interesting, and I appreciate you having me on.
Chris Odell, thank you.
Thank you, Case.